alaikum, everyone. So, everyone who's sitting in this room today, you all have the potential to do amazing things. And if you just said, no, I cannot, that's actually a really good sign because you just identified a potential obstacle. So what lengths will you go to overcome those obstacles? I'm going to walk you through a journey of possibilities. So nearly 8 years ago, I decided to run into the unknown. And I decided to play soccer with the hijab. How, I had no idea back then, but I knew my religion didn't have a problem with it, and I had passion for the sport. So I was born and raised on Long Island, New York, and I was one of the 3 Muslims who attended my high school in Port Washington. And in my neighborhood, we didn't have a Muslim community, so it was really hard to find Muslims with similar interests. But during the summertime, when I would travel to the Middle East with my parents, I would turn on the news and watch the men's sports highlights. There you'd see highlights of the men's soccer and basketball home games. And you'd see replays of side tackles, slam dunks, fouls, and shots on goals. So it was always really fun to watch the men's sports highlights. But when it came to announcing the women's sports highlights, the TV screen would look something like this. And now the women's volleyball team from that Islamic country, they were covered, but it seemed like team sports weren't being advertised very much for the women. But what was being advertised were mostly the solo sports like table tennis and shooting and archery. So I was 15 at the time, and seeing that, I thought that if I wanted to take up a sport, these women truly represented the typical Muslim athlete. And if I wanted to take up a sport in the West while wearing my hijab, I would be limited to these categories. So I went back to high school, and then I got into the habit of self-selecting out. Any team sport, you name it, I would put my finger on it and say, no, that's not for me. I can't wear those shorts, those tops, they're too tight. And so I totally disregarded the idea. But then I met a few friends who attended a high school in New York City, and they were telling me that their coach actually allowed them to play sports with the hijab. I said, how were they able to do that? They said, we had to discuss with him our modest dress requirements. And so just to hear that, I thought, it's possible. So it's actually possible to be able to play sports with the hijab. And so I went back to my school and prepared myself for the next fall season. And then I was determined that I would get in and be able to consistently stay throughout the season. But what happened was that I ran into an injury that left me out for the entire season, and I wasn't able to continue. I was obviously disappointed, but there was also this fear of injury that prevented me from taking up another possible sport. And even in my last year in high school, a friend of mine who was actually on the track team said, Yasamin, you should join the track team with me. And I said, no, it's impossible. That can't happen. I can't wear those clothing. And it's too hot, I can't do this, and I should study for my SATs instead. And so my high school year finished, I graduated, I thought it wasn't a big deal, until I went to Stony Brook University in New York in my first year. I said, okay, I'm gonna be a good engineer, I'm gonna be a good student, study hard and just focus. But at the same time, there was this feeling of wanting to get back out on the field and run and be able to freely participate in these team sports that were really, really fun. And so one time when I was training for the intramurals, running really hard, I injured myself. And I was disappointed again. But this time it was a good disappointment because I actually thought through the injury. I thought about missed opportunities. I thought about how fragile we are and how short of a time we have. And I thought about the next generation of Muslim American girls growing up, and I thought, well, what would they say to me one day? What would my own daughter say to me one day if she finds out that I've given up like this? What would I tell them? Would I tell them that the time wasn't right? Would I tell them that the clothing was too immodest for me to get involved? Or would I tell them that would I be living my dreams through them just because when I had a chance and I was healthy, I didn't have the courage to step into the unknown. And I waited my entire youth for someone else to actually come and take a stab at it when I knew it was possible, but what was actually keeping me from moving forward. And so it was there that I realized the value of a second chance. So that second chance really came when I decided to go to Maryland but missed the fall admissions deadline and went to Montgomery College instead. And upon my enrollment, I received an email about tryouts for the Montgomery College women's soccer team. And so I said, this is it. I'm doing this. It's now or never. I don't care how I look. I'm going to wear my hijab, get onto that soccer field. I don't care if I'm going to look like a tent. I'm going to be running around, and this is my goal. I should be doing this. So the main thing that really came through during that moment was I had to change my intentions this time going into the field. Previously, it was all about me winning a spot on the team. But this time, it was more like, see how you can plant this seed and grow it so the generation after you doesn't have to worry about what you're going through right now. And so on a hot August day, during the third day of tryouts, while my coach saw me all dressed in layers, she came up to me and said, I don't know how you're doing this, but we would like to have you on the team. And so with that, a new chapter in my life began titled The Second Chance. And it was really inspiring because it seemed more than the opportunity of being able to play collegiate sports, my level of faith was being tested. My level of faith was being tested, and that what it really meant to throw yourself in an unknown environment and leave all your affairs in Allah's hands. And so with that and getting over the fear of participating in sports with the hijab, I thought, wow, this is really cool. I could do anything now. So the semester after, instead of transferring to Maryland, I decided to stay at MC one more semester and do track. And during the beginning of the season, my coach, she took me on and she trained me like she would train her other experienced runners. And when I would run alongside runners who ran before in high school, it didn't matter anymore. Now that Allah had given me that second chance, it didn't matter if I was experienced or not. So throughout my track season, my distance coach, she would sign me up for the 800-meter run and the 1,600-meter run, more of these distance races. And towards the end of the season, on her last track meet, she came up to me one day and said, Yasmin, I think you should run the 3,000-meter steeplechase. And she said, I actually signed you up to run the 3,000-meter steeplechase. And I said, you did what, coach? What is this? And she said, oh, don't worry. It's just a fun, interesting obstacle race. You run 7 laps around the track, hurdle over 28 steeples, and clear a water pit during 7 laps. And I just looked at her. And I didn't know what to say, but I thought, if I made a decision to scratch the surface of this unknown environment, I was willing to get myself into anything. And so I said, okay, we'll do the steeplechase. So we went to our track event, and with a few of my teammates, we started walking around the track just to get a feel for how the steeples were, how tall they were. And I remember getting close to this steeple that was near the water pit and looking down and saying, oh my God, what am I getting myself into? But I guess at the beginning, it's just hard a little bit, but then when you get over that, you could pretty much do anything. So I finished that race, and my coach came to me a few days later and said, Yasmin, you were qualified. You met a qualifying time to run the steeplechase again at the Nationals. And then I was shocked about how things were happening so fast in such a short period of time. I said, okay, we flew to the Nationals to New York, And when we arrived at the Nationals, I learned that the first top 8 runners get to win an NJCAA medal. And I thought, this is cool, I'm gonna get a medal. How many people do actually sign up for this race anyways? It's so hard. And my ego was kicking in. So I remember walking up to my coach and telling her, Coach, who are my competitors and what are their times? How many people are actually running this race? And she had these heat sheets in her hand and handed over, and I looked over and I said, okay, Yasamin Ekrami, qualifying time this, the next runner, a few seconds faster, and the next 10 runners had a 3K time about a minute better than me. I was their slowest runner in the pack, and it was like a slap in the face at that time. And I was thinking, I could do this, I could get the medal. And this was 20 minutes right before the race. And so my heart began to pound. The athletic director called for the start of the women's 3,000-meter steeplechase, and so we lined up. And I remember my heart was pounding, my knees were shaking. I was so nervous. I'm about to finish last in front of this huge crowd. But something happened, and I remembered this turn of faith. I did nothing to deserve to be here for the second chance. Allah gave it to me. I didn't ask for it, I didn't pray for it, He gave it to me. I did nothing to deserve it. And the coaches that He put on my path, they were willing to take me in, a rookie who never ran before, never played sports before. They were willing to take me in and train me like they would for the other runners on the team. And so that kind of calmed my heart, and then the gun went off, and we started the race, and I remember the first few laps, it was good. By the 8th lap, I lost my pace, and this was the second time running this race, and then I remember just running the final lap with heart. And I finished the race, and I came back thinking about what had happened, what went on in my mind at that time. And I went back to my community, and a lot of people, those who I met at the masjid or in my community, thought I was a hero, and I used to believe them. Because I used to think if I could only run another race, if I could only hit another personal record, if I could only run another harder race that nobody can, I would never have to feel helpless. But I was wrong, and Allah proved His wrongness when He bestowed upon me injuries that left me out for weeks, when He put defeat along my way, and He unveiled a soul that begged to be trained, to be more humble, and to be more forgiving, and to be more thankful. He also showed that how I was willing to go through the pain of reaching my peak performance, but not accepting an invitation of struggle to purify my heart. A heart which its capacity is higher than your peak performance. Like that. And so I started to think about the potential in sports being one of the signs of Allah, and Him having given me this second chance. I thought, it's hard to believe that this would be an athletic career just ending at the finish line. So I decided to coach other communities, non-Muslim communities, Muslim communities. I got in touch with my former coaches and asked them how I could start something in my Muslim community. And they advised me what events I need to take them and how I could train them. And so 2 years ago, we started the first Muslim girls soccer team in our area. These are girls between the ages of 10 to 14. And so we trained them so they could participate at all-comers meets in Maryland. And then I got back with my soccer coach, and she advised me that I needed to obtain my coaching certificate. So I took a class with the National Soccer Coaches Association of America and obtained my certificate, went back to my community, and we started our first all-girls Muslim soccer team this past year. These girls are between the ages of 12 to 18. And our goal was really to not replace any programs in the high school, but be a buffer, be able to create this environment where we could empower the girls to play sports with the hijab. And not only that, we wanted to give them a tool so eventually throughout their progress, they'll get to have an opportunity to reunite with their faith. And so I want to end my journey with a lesson from the skies. In order for us to uncover the beauty and vastness of space, you and I need to go above and against gravity. But oftentimes, we have a gravity within ourselves that prevents us from exploring our potential and exploring our capacities. Running into the unknown isn't about daring mighty things that no one has ever done, going places where no one has ever gone before, but it's about finding your heart and knowing that only Allah can take care of your second chances. Thank you.